Thank you, Zainab. It's a great pleasure, a great honor to be here. So I will try to speak for about 5 hours. No, that was a joke. About 30 minutes, maybe between 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And then I will take your questions. Maybe one correction that Zainab had. The book came out actually, the book that Islamic Spirituality book came out in November. Somehow you find my old, maybe I didn't update my CV maybe. Anyway, so we'll start with asking you questions before you ask me questions. Because I see many people who are well versed in maybe Islamic knowledge about Jesus. Let's see. What is the most frequently used title for Jesus in the Quran? Of course, Muslims are included. Yes, please. Al-Masih. Well, Al-Masih is the title of Jesus, it is true, but it is not the most frequently. Yes. Isa ibn Maryam. Ibn Maryam, yes, the son of Mary, yes. It is the most frequently title used for Jesus in the Quran, actually. And the son of Mary is actually compatible with the biblical concept of the Son of Man. When the Son of Man comes, we have several references to that in the Bible. And as we know, the phrase of the Son of Man doesn't mean male, actually, the son of human being. So Mary as a human being, Jesus is the son of Mary. The Quran refers to Mary frequently, that's why. So another question, is there a chapter in the Quran named after Jesus? No? No? Muslims? Those who recite the Quran daily? Is there a chapter? You said there is a chapter after his mom. So there is a chapter after Mary. Yeah, it is true. Chapter 19 is after Mary. But do you have a chapter named after Jesus? No? Okay, there is a consensus that there is no chapter named after Jesus in the Quran, but it is wrong. There is a chapter. Actually, there is a chapter named after Jesus in the Quran. As you know, Quranic chapters sometimes have more than one names. Like for example, the first chapter of the Quran is Al-Fatiha, the opening, has another name called Al-Shafiyah, the healing. Similarly, chapter 61, if you look at the contents of the Quran, the name of the chapters, chapter 61 is known as Al-Saf, which means the row of angels. But there is another name for that chapter, and that is Isa, which means Jesus. So chapter actually 61 is named after Jesus in the Islamic tradition. And if you look at the name, the various name of the chapter, you'll see that actually. So there is a chapter.
Chapter 61 or 16?
61. Yes, Al-Saf. The current one in the table of contents, it is known as Al-Saf. Do Muslims believe in the second coming of Jesus?
That's an easy one.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes. So there is a consensus on this, so it's true, yes. Yes, the Muslims believe that Jesus will come back. But how? We will talk about it. Okay, who was Jesus? Born of the Virgin Mary. Basically, Islam and Christianity are in agreement in this regard, that Jesus did not have a physical father. Jesus' birth was a miracle. Muslims believe in this, and the Quran confirms this. That angel Gabriel appeared to Mary and gave her good news that she will have a baby. And Mary says, how can I have a baby? I'm not touched by any human being. And angel says, this is God's ordination. This is God's command. When God says something, it happens. That's it. For God, it's not difficult. So Jesus' birth was a miracle, basically, in the Islamic teaching. He is a bringer of peace. In the Islamic teaching, when he comes back, he will bring peace. He is actually starting the era of peace. That's, what I call it in my book. His eschatological role, that is to bring peace. He is one of the 5 elite prophets in Islam, along with Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon them all. Peace and blessings be upon them all. I shorten. So Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. These are considered the highest of all human beings. The highest. In the history of humanity, from the beginning of humanity until the end of time, these 5 people are the highest. So forget Aristotle, forget Plato, forget these giants of philosophy, Alexander the Great, whatever you can imagine great people in the history of humanity. From an Islamic theological perspective, these five people, known as the possessors of steadfastness in the Quranic language, in the Islamic language, these are the highest of all. So that's why when Muslims look at Jesus, they look with that perspective. He is a Muslim. You realize that I underlined that word. What is the thing that draws your attention in this word? Well, not with capital letter, bravo, yes. I put with lowercase m, intentionally. Because in Arabic language, Arabic language doesn't have lowercase and uppercase letters. All are the same. So you have to figure out. So in English, we have, several other languages that use Latin letters. We have this, and therefore there is a big difference between lowercase m and uppercase m, actually. So Jesus was a Muslim with lowercase m. That means Jesus submitted himself to the will of God. Lowercase m means the one who submits himself to the will of God. Well, uppercase m also has that connotation, but also has the meaning that the person who belonged to Islam, that started with Prophet of Islam in certain period of time, that is Muslim. And I remember once I was giving this talk, I think it was at University of Toronto. And when I said Jesus is a Muslim with lowercase m, a gentleman raised his hand and said, "Professor, I want Jesus to be Muslim with capital M." So as if capital M is greater, because capital. Well, it's not the case. Lowercase m is actually more important. You may be a Muslim with capital M and not Muslim with lowercase m. It is true. And we have actually some Muslims who are Muslims with capital M but not Muslims with lowercase m. So lowercase m is actually more important. To be Muslim in heart, to be Muslim in actions, to be Muslim submitting yourself to the will of God. That's the most important one. That makes a Muslim Muslim, basically. He's a miracle worker. In the Islamic teaching, Jesus has miracles, has many miracles. I will mention some of them. He's an intercessor, so in the afterlife, the beloved of God, like the messengers of God, they will intercede. They will ask God to forgive some people. So Jesus will have that as well. Jesus in primary Islamic sources, in the Quran, as you know, the Quran, the Holy Book of Islam, and in the Hadith. Hadith basically the sayings of the Prophet. We have a huge literature on Jesus in the Hadith collections. I will give several examples. So he's mentioned in more than 90 verses and characterized by his message, basically the gospel. The Quran speaks of Jesus' message as the gospel, and known as Injil, translated as the gospel. Injil is the Quranic word for the gospel. Interestingly, the Quran doesn't use plural form of the word, it instead uses singular. So there is one gospel. It's very interesting, and I think it is very much compatible with modern scholarship that is saying that there is something called Q gospel, which stands for Quell, the German word for the source gospel. So the Quran, interestingly, 1400 years ago, saying the gospel, one gospel, that is the source gospel. In another verse, Jesus speaks of miracles, of his miracles. Jesus speaks. In the Quran, Jesus speaks. Surely I came to you with a sign from your Lord. I create from clay the likeness of a bird. Then I breathe into it and it becomes a bird by God's permission. And then the verse continues actually. I heal the sick. I know what you are storing in your houses. So it gives several miracles of Jesus. And this is the most important, of course, the miracles of Jesus to give life to something. Like a that shape of a bird made of clay, and Jesus breathed into it and it becomes a bird flying. Sometimes I say, you can try it. You might be able to do that, try it. Well, that is Jesus. That's why that was a miracle. He was doing this. And I underline this statement in the Quranic verse, by God's permission. Why he was able to do this? Because he was doing this on behalf of God. He was speaking on behalf of God. That's what is the meaning of miracles. Why God would allow his messengers to show miracles? Because God wanted to show people that these messengers are speaking on behalf of me. You see, I am changing my natural laws for their sake. And that's why they are truthful. They speak the truth. And you have to accept their message. Addressing all human beings, actually. That's why they have miracles. Another Quranic verse, Jesus in this verse specifically speaks of the Torah, that he confirms the message of the Torah. Jesus does not reject the Torah, but confirms the Torah. And this is a principle in Islamic teaching, also in Islamic theology, that Muslims have to believe in 4 great books of God. They have to believe in the Torah, they have to believe in the Psalms, they have to believe in the Gospel, they have to believe in the Quran. 4 great books of God. This is part of Islamic faith. Because these are books of God mentioned in the Quran, and therefore you have to believe in these 4 great books of God. There are some other scrolls, like the scroll of Abraham. The Quran speaks of it. And then again, this verse, confirming the Torah and receiving a new message from God, the gospel. So while confirming the Torah, Jesus also has a new message. The message of God is given according to the need of different societies. God is the same God. The message, the essence of the message is the same, but because time changes and because society changes, a new message is coming. That is the reason. That's why, for example, it is believed that in the time of Jesus, healing was very important. And therefore God empowered Jesus with healing. He was able to bring a dead person to life. In the time of Moses, magics were very common and very challenging. So God empowered Moses with a miracle that was able to swallow the magics of Pharaoh's magicians. In the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon them all, eloquence was very powerful, very challenging. So God empowered the Prophet with eloquence, and that's why the Quran became the most eloquent words, the most eloquent book in the society, and challenged people. He said, if you have any doubt about this book, bring a chapter like it. You will prove your case. But so far, no one has brought a chapter like it, basically. That is, being empowered by eloquence. Jesus, in this Quranic verse, and that is the chapter that I mentioned, Jesus asks, who are my helpers in God's cause? And the apostles of Jesus are praised in this Quranic verse. They say, we are your helpers in the cause of God. So this Quranic verse asks believers, Muslims, to imitate the apostles of Jesus, to be like the apostles of Jesus. Actually it says, be like the apostles of Jesus. When he asked them to help him in the way of God, they said, we are your helpers in the way of God. That's why the Quran encourages Muslims to be like the apostles of Jesus. So they are very much praised in the Quran, actually. Now, moving to a different aspect of Jesus in the Islamic tradition, and that is his eschatological coming, his second coming, what is known in the Christian tradition as the second coming. In Islam, it is known as the descent of Jesus from heaven to earth to bring justice. It is different than the Christian concept of the descent of Jesus going from heaven to hell to rescue the people in hell. It's different than that. It's totally not related to that at all. This is the descent of Jesus coming from heaven to earth to bring justice. He will come. Muslims believe that he will come at the end of time and he will bring justice. But what is the meaning of this and how this should be understood? So I have to confess that when I studied this, I didn't know that we have so much literature in the Islamic tradition on this concept. I would say I found more than 100 books written on the descent of Jesus, on the coming of Jesus. Some of them are very inflammatory, as if Jesus is coming tomorrow. Be prepared, Jesus is coming. Some of them are, just collecting the sayings of the Prophet and commenting on them. Variety of sources. So I categorize them into 3 categories. The first category I said, the modernist approach. This group, generally these are philosophers, Muslim contemporary philosophers. They say, no coming of Jesus. There is no such a thing that Jesus will come back. He died 2,000 years ago and cannot come back. That's their approach. Now what is the percentage of this group? Not like a big percentage. I would say maybe less than 5% of the overall literature. The second group, I call them literalist group. This is really a large group. They believe that Jesus will come directly from sky, like coming with parachute. I remember once I asked one of them and I said, so you mean that he will come from sky, everybody will see him, and then CNN, ABC will have interview with him? He said, that's exactly what will happen. Well, I think just literal understanding. So that's not my favorite one, by the way. My favorite one is, I think, the last one, the third one. This group, this is also very good number of scholars accept the descent of Jesus, but they say it shouldn't be understood literally. It should be understood allegorically, not literally coming from sky, a person coming from sky, not that way. So I will elaborate on, especially the last approach. What is the meaning of it? What is meant by the coming of Jesus when the prophet says he will come? Now there are hints in the Quran that the Quran does not speak directly of the coming of Jesus, but there are some hints that the Quran mentions the second coming of Jesus. In my book, I have a chapter on the Quranic verses that are talking about this. So basically, chapter 43, verse 61, sounds like a direct reference to Jesus as a sign of the hour, which means the hour means the end of time. When the hour comes means when the end of time comes, the final hour. Some Islamic scholars would say it doesn't mean that his coming is the sign of the hour, but having no father, showing the power of God. The God that made Jesus with no father, such powerful God, will bring the afterlife. Some interpret it that way, not as a sign, but the verse clearly says it's a sign of the hour. In this hadith, another saying of the Prophet, by God Almighty, in whose hand my soul is, Jesus, the son of Mary, will soon descend among you as a just ruler. He will come. And the Prophet uses the most strong Arabic statement that when you want to make something certainly will happen. By God Almighty, in whose hand my soul is. In Arabic language, this indicates that this event surely will happen. He will come, no doubt about it. He will come as a just ruler. That means he will bring justice among you Muslims, it says. This is very well known in the major source of the Islamic hadith literature. This hadith shows the feature of Jesus. The Prophet sees Jesus in his dream. The Prophet says, it has been shown to me while I was sleeping, in my dream while I was circumambulating the Kaaba. The Kaaba means the holy shrine of Islam in Mecca. I saw a man of brown color, the best one can see among brown colored human beings. And then the hadith continues. It says, it speaks of Jesus' hair, speaks of Jesus' cleanness. He was so clean that as if he was coming out of shower, that water was dripping from his head. Describing this. And the Prophet said, I said, who is this? And angels said, this is Jesus, the son of Mary. This hadith shows the feature of Jesus as a brown color. Interestingly, what is the color of Jesus in the United States? White, right? Well, the hadith says brown color, actually. And might make sense. Jesus is from the area that actually people generally are brown colored. In this hadith also, Jesus the prophet says, surely Jesus the Messiah will find some people from among my community as his helpers. Some Muslims will help Jesus, the hadith says. At the end of time, some Muslims will help Jesus when he comes back. And it's a little bit long hadith. It says, those who are helping Jesus, the Prophet addressing his own companions, he said, they are like you, even better than you. So much praising those people. In the Sufi literature, there is a long, actually, a huge literature on Jesus. So I will skip this part so that you'll read the book. Give you some time for reading the book. And I think it is worth reading because I spent 6 years on that book. So, Jesus, a prophet of love. Generally, this is the teaching of love. In the Islamic teaching is very essential. The concept of love, which is one of the names of God. Love is Al-Wadud, one of the divine names. And Jesus, known as the prophet of love, some Islamic scholars, based on this principle, developed the idea of love. Especially necessary in our time, that hatred is so much dominating. So Nursi, for example, Bediüzzaman Nursi, that we named a chair after him at John Carroll University, to love love and to hate hatred. He says, if you love love, love will increase. If you hate hatred, hatred will decrease. In fact, he says, there is nothing deserves hatred more than hatred itself. And Fethullah Gülen actually developed on this. He wrote several articles on the concept of love. That's so important in our time. Muhammad Abdu speaks of this concept of the descent of Jesus. He doesn't accept this literal meaning. He uses allegorical language. He says the prophet, when he said that Jesus will come, the prophet meant that mercy, love, and peace, which are the essential elements of the message of Jesus, when these elements are dominating the society, that means Jesus has come. So do you like to be on the side of Jesus? Then work for these concepts. Then you are on the right path. You are on the side of Jesus, basically. You are actually doing the message of Jesus, that when he comes, because it's highly mentioned in the Islamic literature, well, describe that, please, when you see him, recognize him, so that you will not be lost. Muhammad Abdu says, if you follow the path of mercy, the path of love, and the path of peace, you will not be lost. You are in the same path, basically. So do that, basically, he says. Muhammad Hamdi Yazır, also is Turkish commentator of the Quran, also speaks of Jesus, but for the interest of time, I will skip this one too. Actually, I have an appendix on Muhammad Hamdi Yazır's interpretation of these Quranic verses at the end of the book, so you can read that. And it's the first time available in English. I translate from Turkish. Nursi, he is a really remarkable personality in understanding this concept of the coming of Jesus. And I think it is very essential for our time. He says the prophet, when he said Jesus will come, the prophet meant dialogue between Muslims and Christians. In one occasion, he says the people of the book, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And I think it makes a great sense. And in my book, I argue for this. Dialogue, he uses actually even the term alliance. Alliance, coming together, having cooperation for the betterment of society. if we manage to come together, the members of these three Abrahamic traditions, with a rough calculation, they constitute about 58% of world population. 58%. They can make a big change. They can bring peace to the world. And it is so essential. And that's why I think Nursi's approach is very, very important. And it gives some hope to me because I see there is a good development in dialogue, in this cooperation moving forward. And actually, excuse me, this is very much compatible with the teaching of the Quran, because the Quran invites the people of the book to a common ground. Say this Quranic verse in chapter 3, verse 64, say this, O Muhammad, say, declare, O people of the book. People of the book is a term in the Quran used for Christians and Jews, because they believe in the Torah and they believe in the gospel. That's why they have preference in the Quranic language, the people of the book. All people of the book, Christians and Jews, let's come to a common word between us. Common ground, common word. Quranic language is using common word. That all of us worship none but God. What is this common word? What is this encompassing umbrella that brings Muslims, Christians, and Jews together? That is believing in one God. We all are monotheistic. So we believe in the same God. Let's come together under this largest umbrella that encompassing all of us. The Quran invites, actually. And there is another verse in the Quran that diversity is a divine plan. Not necessarily to be like one style. Everybody will have different style. The verse said, if God willed, He could have made you one community, but He didn't. This verse addressing all human beings. If God wanted, He would have made you one community, like one style of human beings. He didn't. And God asks, the verse continues actually, says, vie with one another for good deeds. And that's why I describe this competition. There is no loser in this competition. Everybody is winning because all are doing good deeds, competing for good deeds, and therefore they are supporting each other. If we make our society such a society that is competing with good deeds, I think that is what the message of the coming of Jesus that is mentioned in the Islamic literature. I emphasize this in several chapters in the book. So the Quran, again, has many verses on dialogue. Historically, it happened. This is a historical event that when Muslims were persecuted in the city of Mecca, they were almost to be annihilated because there was a big, very powerful elite group in Mecca, and Prophet Muhammad's new followers were marginalized people, were weak people, and the Prophet realized that they will be killed one by one. The Prophet said, migrate. Well, to where? The Prophet said, Abyssinia, which is modern-day Ethiopia. In Abyssinia, in Ethiopia, there is a Christian king. No one is wronged in his land, so go there. He will protect you. It's a long story. To make this long story short, basically they go there, and this king protects Muslims, and he makes a big friendship with the Prophet. He sends letters to the Prophet responds to him, and when he passes away, Angel Gabriel informs the Prophet, because Ethiopia is far from Medina, the Prophet was in Medina. On the same day, the Prophet learned that he passed away. And he gathered his community and he said, today, your brother Najashi, the Islamic name for the king, the Christian king, Najashi, the English word is Negus, N-E-G-U-S, King Negus. Today he passed away, let's have a funeral prayer for him in absentia. So the Prophet organized funeral prayer for this Christian king. And this is the beginning of Islam. So actually it started very well. You know, this dialogue and cooperation started in the very beginning of Islam. So when we start this alliance between the people of the book, we are not inventing something that is not there. Actually, we are following the major teaching of the religion of Islam. And it is going on today. I am very pleased to see this trend in various segments of society. This is something called, I was part of this Catholic Muslim dialogue, National Catholic Muslim Dialogue. Annually they come together. There is also Midwest Catholic Muslim Dialogue, and actually East Coast, West Coast Catholic Muslim Dialogue. So it's going on. This upper one is another event, and this is very interesting. I was part of this dialogue too. It was dialogue between Muslims and Baptists. Generally, they think that there cannot be dialogue between Muslims and Baptists. Even they were joking when they started. They would say perhaps this will be the first and the last meeting between Muslims and Baptists. But actually, they proved that it was not the last. Now they have, I think, the third or the fourth annual dialogue meeting between Muslims and Baptists. So it is, the trend is going on. One of the things that gives me hope is also the highest person in the Catholic Church, the head of the Christian Church, Pope Francis, gives a great support to dialogue, actually. And he gave this to at the joint session of Congress. Being at the service of dialogue and peace also means being truly determined to minimize and, in the long term, to end the many armed conflicts throughout our world. So this is again a hopeful development that we will be successful in dialogue. And then finally, in my book, I have a, like the conclusion of the conclusion. And basically, I argue that if this trend of dialogue bring peace and harmony to our communities, that will be the fulfillment of the message of Jesus and Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon them. Thank you very much.
There's two main ways of understanding the second coming.
Yes.
The literalists and the allegorical, which is what you mainly talked about.
Yes.
Is that distinction between different sects of Islam, the literalists being primarily in one sect and the allegorical in another sect, or is it sort of mixed?
I would say it's mixed. It's basically some people who are literalist. It's not like a one sect per se. I remember, based on education sometimes, like once I was giving this talk in one of the places, I think it was in Arizona, and a couple came to me and said, I have been struggling with this hadith, how a person coming from sky. And I was almost denying the hadith, but now after listening to you, I found out that there is a way to understand the hadith. So he said, you rescued my faith. And he was from Saudi Arabia. So he changed my prejudice. You know that Saudi Arabians are generally literalist. He was not literalist. But actually there was another person, again from Saudi Arabia, he was a student. And he looked at these three approaches, he said, I like the middle one, the literalist one. And I said, why? Actually, this also gives us a mentality. You know. I said, why you like the middle one, the literalist one? He said, because you don't have to worry about what God will do, just believe in it and God will take care of it. Don't worry, God will take care of it, but God will do that. Well, I said, you know, for a theologian, it's perplexing. So I have to explain this, basically. So there are some people who are just saying that keep it as is, and then God will take care of it. And I think that's the majority. That's generally people don't like to elaborate, because they don't know how to elaborate. And it has something to do with interpretation, with comments, with backgrounds. So it has many factors in it, actually. Yes, please.
Thank you for the insightful lecture. So I had 3 questions for you.
Please.
If I may. So the first one, you mentioned that there's 4 books, and mentioned in the Quran that most people follow. So you said the Quran, Torah, the Injil. What's the book of Psalm?
Psalms is Zabur in the Zabur.
Zabur. Okay.
Zabur, yes.
Okay.
Zabur, as you know, in the Islamic tradition, Zabur was revealed to David.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, that's clear.
So, yes.
Okay. Okay. Next question.
Yes, please.
So, what surah and ayah was it when you said that Jesus, peace be upon him, he breathed into a dead bird and gave life into it? What surah and ayah?
I think it was there in the chapter. Just to make sure.
349 to 53.
Yes, 349 to 53. Yes.
Okay, great.
It is there. There are many other miracles of Jesus, so it's not one verse, but it's several verses.
Okay, great. And then last question. So you said that Jesus, he has lots of miracles, and he's an intercessor. Now, correct me if I'm mistaken. Us as Muslims, you know, we always talk about Muhammad, peace be upon him. He is the intercessor, and when we make dua and praise, we always ask for him as an intercessor. We don't, or at least I've never heard of people mention Jesus as an intercessor after Sayyidina Muhammad came.
Yes. There are levels of intercession. The Prophet of Islam has Shafa'atul Uzma, the greatest intercession. But the Quranic verse says, in Ayatul Kursi says, those who God gives permission will intercede. And who are those? If you look at the commentaries, the messengers of God. So basically, those who are beloved by God. And therefore, they may say, Lord, forgive this person. Even in Islamic tradition, sometimes like a woman can intercede for her husband. She is in paradise and her husband in hell, and God forgives her husband for her sake because of her sincerity, because of her. So there is, the concept of intercession is a very large concept in the Islamic Sunni theology. Shiite theology, I don't know, but the Sunni theology has a very strong understanding of intercession. Mu'tazilites don't accept intercession, but the Sunni tradition is very much powerful.
And other way around, husband can also?
Yes, in the Quranic language, used for Christians and Jews. It's really Ahlul Kitab. It's a very specific term. Infidels, kafir, the Arabic word for infidel, is used for those who do not believe in God. Those who do not believe in God, the word infidel is used. But for Christians and Jews, the word Ahlul Kitab is commonly used in the Quran.
Is it correct to translate kafir as infidel though?
Kafir is the literal meaning of kafir. One meaning is actually the denier. the denier of the bounties of God. The literal meaning of the word kafir. But infidel is translated, some people translate that as infidel. Infidel is also kind of denying the bounties, etc.
So that can that infidel be somebody who used to be Muslim or Christian or Jewish and becomes atheist? Is that the idea? Or is it somebody who's in a different religion besides those three?
Like pagan?
No, it's not like a separate religion. Infidelity is not like a religion.
So it's non-religious people.
Non-religious term. I would say anyone from the word that is used in the Quran. For example, the Quran uses this for the idol worshippers of Mecca. They were idol worshippers. They were denying God.
Okay.
So it's like a type of people.
So would that apply to like Hindus is also a kafir in that they don't believe in?
Some Muslims call, that's a very good question. Is Hinduism denying God? Generally, this is debated among Muslim scholars. And some Muslim scholars in India, after encountering with Hindus, they decided that Hindus are also among the people of the book. It's very interesting.
Good compromise.
Yes, because they have a book, and they believe in Brahman, which is the greatest God. So some Muslim scholars interpreted that way after encountering with Hindus, because as you know, there were no Hindus in the Arabian Peninsula when the Quran was revealed. So if the Quran would mention Hindus, it will be really something strange for the audience of the Quran.
Except they use idols.
Yes, it uses some generic terms, so that's why the people of the book is a generic term, and then generally understood as Jews and Christians because they were the people of the book. So then they compare Hindus. For example, in the era of Omar, the second Caliph of Islam, when Muslims encountered Zoroastrians in Iraq, Omar said, treat them like you treat the people of the book. So Zoroastrians were also considered the people of the book. It's very interesting. It's a highly developed concept in the Muslim tradition.
So what do they think of Buddhists?
But one thing I can tell you, some scholars of Buddhism. I have a friend who is professor of Buddhism. When we said Buddhism sounds like an atheistic religion, he's expert. I'm not expert of Buddhism. He said that it is wrong. Buddhism is not an atheistic religion. Buddhism has theology, has the concept of God. So there are very beautiful statements by Buddha. There are very beautiful principles. Now, actually, if we look at the essence of Islam, there is a verse in the Quran. It says about the prophets, naming the prophets. The Quranic verse says, addressing the prophet and Muslims, the community of Islam, that there are many prophets historically. We have mentioned some of them for you, which are generally about 28 prophets in the Quran, namely, like Adam is a prophet, Sheeth as a prophet, Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, Solomon, David, Ishmael, Isaac, Job, Jonah. These are all prophets namely mentioned in the Quran. So there is no doubt about this. But the Quran speaks of some prophets who are not named in the Quran. It says there are many that we didn't mention their names. And because of this inclusive context of the verse, some Muslims would argue that, for example, Confucius could have been a prophet. Buddha could have been a prophet because their teaching is so beautiful, is really looking like the teaching of a prophet. So it actually making much more an inclusive approach to the history of prophethood, because there is a saying of the prophet himself. He said, God sent 124,000 prophets before me. So not only 28, but 124,000 prophets came before Islam. And Muslims have to believe in all of them, generically, believe in all of them. Those who are named by name, they have to believe them by name.